speaker, respected session chair, moderator, the valuable authors and participants, Assalamu alaikum, and a very good morning. We are delighted to welcome you all in this online keynote session of 2020 Second International Conference on STI 4.0. Rapporteurs Tanzila Yasmin Nilu, alongside me, Mohammad Ehsan Shahmi, are hosting you in this keynote session D2K8. We are happy to inform all that this keynote session is going to be delivered by Monirul Sharif, and the session is going to be chaired by Professor Dr. Muhammad Mahbub Alam, Department of CSE from Islamic University of Technology. Further, our session is going to be moderated by Professor Dr. Muhammad Abdul Razzaq, Pro Vice Chancellor from Green University of Bangladesh. We have 35 minutes for our honorable speaker's speech with around 10 minutes for discussion. We'll also provide a remainder of 5 minutes before the end of this 35-minute speech. May I now hand over the session to our honorable chair, Professor Dr. Muhammad Mahbub Alam sir. Thanking you all.
Thank you very much. I guess I am hearable, right? You can hear me.
Yes, please continue.
Thank you very much. On behalf of STI 4.0, organized by the Green University, I would like to welcome all of the participants, especially the professors, industry personnel, and young researchers, and most of all the speaker. It's an honor to me to be present here in this session. Actually, this session is going to be conducted by Monirul Sharif. I think no introduction is required for him, but just to follow the process, let me tell something about Monirul Sharif. He has been working at Google for the last 10 years and is currently a senior engineer manager leading the mobile threat analysis platform group. And his group actually researches and builds large-scale automated threat analysis and detection systems that are used by Google for various products and various organizations as well. Prior to join Google, Monirul completed his PhD from Georgia Tech and his master's from Princeton University. And he also completed his undergrad and master's from the Computer Science Department of the University of Dhaka. He published numerous conferences that I can see, IEEE, Security and Privacy, SEM CCS, NDSS, many more actually. His career actually has many publications, many actually very high impact publications. So I should not waste time here because the time, as we are running out of time, I like to hand over the session to Monirul Sharif and very much interested to hear from him. Ladies and gentlemen, and everybody, please welcome Monirul Sharif. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mahbub Alam sir, for the introduction. Let me actually share my slide over here. Is it visible?
Yes, it is.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to actually be here today, and I wanted to really give my greetings to the participants, honorable teachers, researchers, keynote speakers, and also the future researchers. So I'm actually here to talk today about something that should be hopefully giving all of you researchers a kind of idea of security, mobile security, and the interesting research problems in this area. I actually have been working in this area for quite some time, but I've also noticed that this is sometimes, as security is an afterthought for many systems, security is sometimes overlooked. So my hope is that in today's talk, I kind of provide various problems and research problems that are actually faced by software developers, users, let me actually go into talk. So I just wanted to talk a bit about my group, the Mobile Threat Analysis Platform Group. This is actually a part of Android Security and Privacy. The goal of this group is to develop large-scale systems that analyze Android apps. And I'll give a talk in the middle about what analyzing means. But the main idea is that there are various threats that are affecting users. And Google has billions of users. And you can imagine that Google's technologies not only are, search, there is, of course, Android, which is used by billions of devices around the world. At the same time, there is huge ads business. There is also other businesses like, Gmail, Maps, and all of these are used by mobile users. So what my group basically does is identifies various threats and mobile threats by automatically analyzing apps and generating leads or threat indicators that a lot of core technologies in Google use. So in this talk, what I'll try to do is increase the awareness about mobile cybersecurity. I will not go into the deep topics here. I just want to keep it very light and simple. And at the same time, I just wanted to say that I'm not going to talk about anything inside from Google. There will not be any internal discussions. Most of these are public knowledge. So with that, let me actually go into my main topic. So let me actually see if I can't actually see everyone over here. Okay, so let me continue. So mobile ecosystem, and I think you know that over 7 billion users are using mobile devices by the year 2021. Even now, it's getting close to that number. As you can see, people are using mobile devices all the time. Almost, there is a estimated number that 4 hours are spent by users on average, and 90% of users spend those time on apps. These apps can range from, from entertainment, from news, from actually very important parts of their, users' lives, like, for example, messaging or even commuting. But a very important thing that users do is also tackle financial transactions. And we can see that over $500 billion are actually going through mobile payments. You can imagine that's a huge number right now. And it does pose a lot of threat to users when they're actually doing financial transactions. More than 3/4 of Americans have checked their online balance in 2019 through mobile phones. We can also say that 80% of smartphones, 80% of smartphone users are actually doing purchases over their mobile phone in the last 6 months. And also the mobile app market is getting huge. There's a $600 billion revenue in this year from mobile apps. And you can see that that's not actually, just in the developing countries, developed countries, also in the developing countries as well. So in cases where, there are ads from various brands, they're actually also spending ads, and $240 billion were spent in ads in 2020. So with all of this, you can see that e-commerce, mobile e-commerce is a huge platform, and this also enables a lot of cybercrime. Nearly $500 billion got lost in 2018, and we are estimating more than $1 trillion will be lost in cybercrime in this year, especially because of coronavirus. There is a lot of users using phones from their homes, a lot of users utilizing phones for e-commerce, and that's why it's giving opportunities for hackers to also create a lot of cybercrime and create loss. If you can think about this, 10 years ago, the actual cybercrime amount was around 50 billion. So in the last 10 years, you can see that it has been a huge growth. And it seems that the last couple of years, it was exponential. Now, if we just step back a bit and look at this, you can imagine that this huge amount of money, when we're saying that it's getting lost due to cybercrime, this is actually money lost by users, lost by companies, lost by governments. And also sometimes some of this money goes into the pockets of the adversaries or the actual hackers. And it is a huge business. I think many people might think that 20 years or 30 years ago, writing viruses or writing malware or creating like hacks or all of these were for fun, but now it's a huge source of money. This has made cyber criminals very organized, and they're actually sometimes even more organized, and they even have done research which sometimes rivals that academic research as well as organizations do. So let's talk about a few types of cybercrime here. I think it hasn't gotten to that state yet in Bangladesh, but the rest of the world, the same problems we're seeing happening for cyber crime is soon to be happening in Bangladesh as well. Some of these are, as you can see, cyber theft, stealing credentials, stealing financial information. You can think of people who are actually using online banking when they're actually logging in. There is different methods where attacks can actually steal these credentials. And once it's stolen, some of the attackers do take money away from users' bank accounts. There is issues about privacy violation. You can think about, this is coming always in the news, where users who are using mobile phones, now since they carry it with them, it's a problem for being tracked. So it may be possible for attackers to know location of certain people. It may be possible to actually steal their identity, and sometimes even steal personal data and sell them. You may have heard of cyber extortion, which is actually taking someone's devices and controlling it and asking ransom. And this actually is a huge source of income for bad guys as well. And I think I don't have to say much about misinformation. We have seen this happening a lot in the last few years, where people are getting susceptible to various kinds of misinformation that can actually influence people or even exploit people to do things that they were actually not willing to do. Cyber espionage is a big issue. There are actually companies, and I think you've recently seen in the news that the US government has also been under attack from Russia by cyber criminals. So this is actually happening right now, and it's happening at a very large scale. And I also want to mention here that although we're talking about users here, sometimes when users get attacked and they're actually compromised, this actually is a stepping stone for further attacks, where financial institutes, governments, or even large organizations can get affected. So you can think of like smartphones and apps can even bring down a company. It's sometimes sounds funny to say this, but it can happen. So to actually prevent all of this, a lot of companies do spend on cybersecurity. And cybersecurity, sometimes companies have their own cybersecurity teams, or sometimes companies do hire cybersecurity tools, or even hire companies to kind of represent their systems or help design their systems to improve their security. this year, the amount of money spent for cybersecurity has reached to almost $150 billion. When I'm speaking in billions of dollars, I think it's sometimes, these are US dollars, of course, but when we think about it, it is actually a huge amount of money. So now I actually wanted to talk a bit about the mobile ecosystem. So what I'm trying to do is mostly talk about first about cybersecurity, about the overall issues of cybersecurity and different types of attacks. And then I want to kind of move into the mobile ecosystem. In all of this, there is a large area of exposure to mobile users, and we will talk about various problems in mobile security. So before that, I wanted to actually first show a bit about the mobile ecosystem. So let's say the users are the heart of the mobile ecosystem. So we are trying to say that we want to protect billions of users around the world. So what do users use? Of course, users use phones, they will use wearables, and there will be a lot of IoTs in the future. There are home equipments as well. And of course, users use the internet. And to use the internet, they use browsers and they access the internet through that. Now, we can think of companies, government organizations, sometimes users access them through the internet. So that's actually part of the ecosystem as well, but they don't usually use the browser. In many cases, users are using apps. Almost 90% of cases, users are using apps. And these apps are either developed by the companies themselves, or they're actually app developers who are actually developing these apps. And these apps are then becoming the gateway for users to access information from these companies, government organizations, and different brands. But these apps are usually not directly coming to the users. They have to come through app stores. And I think you know that Apple has a huge, Apple's App Store. Google has an app store called Play. And the number of apps there are immense. Right now, Google Play has almost 3 million apps. Almost every day there are 80,000 more apps added or submitted for publication. So this app store is also part of the ecosystem and is enabling users to access these various kinds of apps they're actually interested in. Ads is an important part of this ecosystem because this is how brands get recognized. This is how companies or different organizations get attention from users. So ads is also a huge spending for various companies. But when apps are used ads are used in apps, they're actually coming through ad SDKs. I won't go into details of what ad SDKs means, but these are software development kits. They're actually becoming part of these apps and showing various ads. Now, on the other hand, when you're using phones and IoTs and wearables, there is an operating system, of course, right? And the operating system developer, you can think of, for example, Google is an operating system developer here, developed Android. Apple has developed iOS. But these mobile operating systems becoming part of these phones, there is variations of these mobile OSs for different phones. And that's why there is actually a tight collaboration with vendors. Vendors are called OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, and they are taking a mobile OS, generating their own builds and putting them in their phones. And this is a very simplified view of what they actually do. At the same time, chipset developers who are developing the core chips, developing chips for not only communication but processing as well, and they're used by these vendors to actually put in the phone. Last but not least, I think we've already heard the previous keynote speech. Telecom is a big deal. It's a huge, important part of this ecosystem. And this is just showing that all the communication, of course, happens through these telecommunication companies. And it is a huge part of this ecosystem as well. Finally, cloud computing, as we became more and more mobile, app developers go towards cloud. A lot of companies are actually, converting their technologies into cloud services rather than having their own services. So you can see all of this together is sort of very simplified definition of what a mobile ecosystem can look like. And when we talk about security or mobile security, you can easily highlight the places where security is important. So I just highlighted it with red. Which places are very vital? Security is very vital for these areas. At the high level, you can see that to protect users, you have to protect, for example, the phones. So phone security becomes very important. You have to protect the mobile operating system that comes into these phones. Security for telecom is becoming important. Security in the hardware is important. Apps need to be built with security in mind. So app security is a very important area where app developers need to be aware of how to make their apps more secure when they're actually communicating or transmitting data, or actually users are interacting with it. At the same time, security, there is mobile browser security. You can understand that when browsers are the gateway to access the internet, that it's a wild west out there, and various types of exploits or attacks can come through this internet, and mobile browsers have to have the security built in. And you've heard of various kinds of attacks, or websites can actually have vulnerabilities, and we'll talk a bit about that soon. Just give me 1 minute. I think my screen blanked out over here. Sorry about that. So as I was saying, the mobile security areas, I'm just highlighting them over here. So we talked about mobile operating system security a little bit, that operating systems need to be secure. And that's a huge area where the developers of mobile operating systems have to focus on various technologies that they put into this operating system to make it secure. Hold on, please. I think there's a bit of issue. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Sorry, I think my screen was just going blank. So let me actually do it here.
From Google, you shouldn't be used to Zoom. As you said.
Unfortunately, yes, I haven't been using Zoom. I've been using Meets a lot, and it's a bit embarrassing for not actually being able to use this properly. Anyway, going back to the talk again. So I've been talking about mobile operating system security. We'll talk a bit about that. There's another area, mobile abuse or threat analysis and detection, mobile app security, mobile hardware security, telecommunication security, ad security, and as well as user privacy. So all of these are kind of different areas in mobile security. I will not be able to give highlights of all of these today. I'll just talk about the first two. Again, my goal was to mostly give an idea, and especially when we're talking about the IR for we just have to know that while various companies, organizations, groups, researchers are all working on technology for the users, security is very essential. And I sometimes think this is a case where security is always an afterthought. And the awareness of security is so important. The awareness of thinking about security when designing systems or developing systems and products is so important that it actually needs to be internalized by everyone. Users sometimes are not aware of security. And there is always a talk about usability and security being against each other. So when we want to make something very secure, it becomes less usable. And whenever we think about making something more usable, it loses security. So there's always this kind of tug of war between usability and security. And making something at the same time usable and secure is a very hard problem. So that needs to be thought about by all product developers, technology developers. And in many cases, sometimes security is happening in the background. So whenever we're talking about operating system security, this is actually in the OS. A lot of things happen without users even knowing it. And that is another reason why sometimes developers or tech companies, while they are aware of this problem, sometimes it's too late for them because they do face issues and then they realize that no, they have to think about security. So this is another reason why I think for all future researchers, and even students who are becoming future researchers, to actually start thinking about security and also making sure that this, at least the knowledge is acquired, and that will help actually make the industrial revolution possible. I will just quickly talk a bit about why mobile security research is interesting. I think everyone loves solving very hard problems, and some of the security problems are very theoretically hard. I think if people look at cryptography, they've heard about public key cryptography. It's based on very hard problems that are unsolvable, and we are doing estimates of these. At the same time, there's other problems like program analysis, which is, if you look at theoretical computer science, there is a problem of undecidability, and some of these problems go into this area. So there are lots of open problems in security, and what we are sometimes trying to do is making best effort systems. So there is nothing like a completely fully secure system. There will always be some problems, and what we try to do is iterate over it. Sometimes we make a system secure and then we find some problems and then we try to make it more secure, and that's how things go. There's another issue about adapting adversaries. That means whenever we build a defense, when we nullify an attack, adversaries know about this and then they become aware of it, and then they improve their attacks and they build new approaches, and that's another issue. So it's sometimes interesting when we're building defenses in security to actually try to even break it before the adversaries can. And that is why we will see sometimes a lot of researchers are actually taking more of the attack route and identifying holes before attackers do. You might actually be hearing about vulnerability research, where it is more targeted about finding problems in programs. And the idea is to do it before an adversary can do it. When we work on security, it does affect real people. And sometimes it's hard to know how much it helps. But unless people are affected by security issues, sometimes they're not aware of what this can mean. The scale of the problems in security, we can sometimes see the news and then we can realize how big it is. We also need to do some of the security research for helping companies grow, because most of these companies or technology companies, sometimes even the small companies, when they're growing up, they might not think of security, and it's more of like an afterthought. So sometimes research goes into approaches where we can automate some of these security systems, so that take a system and we kind of analyze it and make it secure automatically. Those are some of the interesting areas of research as well. And I think I was talking about, the Bangladesh, and as Bangladesh, goes into this technological revolution, the lot of problems that we see, for example, in developed countries like USA, will happen in very large scale in countries like Bangladesh. And we need to kind of be aware of this and make sure that we're looking at problems that are very, very much specific to, for example, Bangladesh, which we might not see in the world. Here are some pointers. So I actually wanted to mention that security problems are sometimes not actually as ubiquitous as other areas. So we might need to look at various security conferences for knowing what's happening in the world. One of the main reasons is in other areas of computer science, it's very easy for new techniques to be released and talked about. But one of the issue of security is that sometimes new technologies are not published easily because of reasons where if we talk about these defenses, the attackers might know about it. Nevertheless, there are special security conferences like IEEE, SNP, ACM, CCS, Unix Security, and NDSS. These are the premier security conferences around the world. And I actually would like to suggest, people who are interested in research in security actually go to these publication sites and see the recent papers and get an idea of what the problems are. What are the recent problems that researchers are looking at? At the same time, there's industrial research, such as Black Hat RSA security, and you can also see security blogs from various security companies. So I quickly want to go over some fundamentals. I think my goal for today's talk is more about, highlighting some of these interesting research areas. So I'll probably talk a bit about some definitions. I do have almost a few minutes left, maybe 5 minutes more, right?
Yes, there was a buzzer, 5 minutes left.
Okay, so I think I'll just quickly talk about a few things before I finish my talk. And then I would really be open to questions and answer those questions because there are a lot of things I couldn't go over in this talk. So I think, we've been talking about vulnerabilities. You've been hearing about vulnerabilities maybe sometimes. And this is very interesting to know that when we talk about hacking, what does really hacking mean? Hacking or hackers usually look for vulnerabilities in systems, and these are bugs, these are process weaknesses, or sometimes even misconfigurations in various systems. And attackers look for these vulnerabilities, and they write different exploits. And exploits are programs that take advantage of this knowledge of vulnerabilities and gain access to systems and gain higher privilege. And we have heard about authentication. Maybe authentication is more about the process of recognizing users. Privilege is a way of defining what a right is for particular actions of users. Encryption, I think people have already heard about it. And interesting, I want to talk about malware at the end. So malware are programs that are performing abuse. These are programs that are designed to take, exploit vulnerabilities or break authentication, gain privilege, or perform social engineering. So I think with all of this, I just wanted to quickly talk about, Android, OS, and its permissions. Let me just talk about Android a bit. So I do suggest for researchers to look at the Android OS in general and identifying, what are the security properties that are given there. And we know that it's based on Linux. We know that it's an open platform, but there are also very interesting security properties in Android. And I think it would be good to kind of area. There are companies that are giving bug bounties. Also interesting topics on authentication, access control, and how to kind of improve it, especially for Android, which is, because it's an open platform, it's very easy for researchers to kind of look at this and see how to improve. I will quickly go over the rest because I might have only 1 minute. Yes, I also wanted to talk about research areas on threats. Identifying new threats is an interesting area where you can identify how a novel technique can be used to take advantage of a system or an app or a certain technology and see if the user security can be broken. I haven't talked about static and dynamic analysis, but these are analysis approaches which are used to analyze apps and identify security issues or abuse. So looking into these areas and identifying what are the new techniques, how can we defeat some anti-analysis techniques as well. I think those are nice areas to look at. And finally, machine learning, of course, is an important area in security as well. And there is both need for supervised machine learning as well as unsupervised machine learning.
Dr. Mahabub is there?
Yes, I am here.
Yeah, please coordinate the Q&A session, please.
Okay, Dr. Monirul, thank you very much for your nice presentation. Actually, many of us here in Bangladesh works on security, especially computer security. But security on mobile is a very new research from Bangladesh's perspective, if I consider the students' interest in security researches. On the other hand, actually, due to this digital Bangladesh, many of the things are implemented here or going to be implemented here, most of which actually are currently not considering the security aspect. So under that circumstance, it's a very, very timely topics chosen by you. Thank you very much. If there is any question, please proceed.
And I was also hoping that if there are like certain topics to just discuss on in the last few minutes, maybe besides questions, if there are certain things that are directed about.
Then I have a request. Since machine learning has been used almost all areas in computer science, and for computer security, vulnerability detection, or APT, or threat analysis, threat sequence analysis, in almost all purposes, machine learning or deep learning are used. If you can focus some, so that the new researcher can actually find these areas interesting for their future research.
Yes, I think let me talk a few minutes about this. I don't have very specific slides on some deep things there, but at the high level, one of the main interesting problems of machine learning used for security is that while machine learning used in other areas, you have a well-defined target. In security area, the adversary or the target is actually moving. So what happens is that there are certain things that you have to do. For example, how can we update our machine learning models automatically? Because once you train a model, it becomes stale even in one day. And there are certain research areas of how can we train these models continuously? How can we efficiently look at adaptation of these targets? One of the problems of using ML in security is the understandability. Because if you're using deep neural networks here, whenever a classification or identification of a problem happens, there is not much of information about which is actually also gaining a lot of interest in this area. And finally, I would suggest to think about adversarial ML, which is an area where you think about how can we train models with an adversary in mind. So this is another area which might be very interesting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Dr. Mahabub sir, I do have one point.
Please proceed.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Monirul Sharif, for spending your valuable time with our authors and participants. I just would like to know that, Google is providing, excellent services to continue our online education systems. It has Google Meet, it has Google Classrooms, but for the class conduction platform, rather than using Google Meet, we are observing that a significant portion in the academic community is using Zoom platform or any other platform. So how about Google's future plan to provide a holistic service, good quality service class for online education system? This is my point of concern.
Okay, so thanks for the question, sir. I think one of the things that happened when this pandemic came this year is Google was caught off guard, and
Here's a result from search.
Sorry, I think it's Google Assistant talking here. So what happened is like Google got off guard here, but Zoom actually had a lot of features which Google had to spend some time adding into Meet. So right now you'll see that Google Meets does have some features which is almost close to what Zoom can provide. One of the things that you can see is Google Classrooms, and that holistically kind of adds together various features of Google Docs, Google Sheets, and other things along with Google Meet, so that you can schedule schedule meetings, schedule classrooms. You can also very easily, provide homeworks, tasks, and take exams. So at this point, Google Meet does have a solution where you can kind of combine everything together. Previously, there was an issue, and I think that's maybe one of the reasons why Zoom has become very, very popular.
Okay, thank you. We can take some other questions from others.
Yeah, Professor Mahabub.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question?
Please. Sharif. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, Monir, good to see you. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Oh, you have been talking about security. It was a nice presentation. Thank you. I was also considering one question. Like with security, we have like privacy, and privacy preserving is another big issue. My question is, are we giving everything to Google nowadays? I mean, how much our privacy is preserved in front of Google? I mean, I was observing something like that. If I'm in conversation with my wife or with my friend on some topic, that okay, we should buy this or that, and actually we are receiving ads for that sometimes. I mean, how is that possible? Our Google is actually overhearing our conversation nowadays?
So I think, some of the things that you might be seeing, I know that like there's a huge concern. I mean, I really understand this, and personally also, as a Google employee, we also sometimes, understand why these concerns are coming. So privacy, when we talk about privacy, one of the things that Google does is, although it takes a lot of data, for the user's advantage, some of these data are shared among various products. So one of the things happen is that when you're searching something, this search is kind of, stored along with your profile, like what things you were searching. And that is sometimes used by other products of Google. But when it's used, one thing has to be kind of understood here, that it's not shared with outside vendors or outside companies. And the idea is that when someone is, for example, targeting ads, the ad system can use some of the data to help, an advertiser find the right target. One of the issues here is, right now there are questions about, when you're actually talking and when you're, saying something and Google Assistant is listening, is it actually listening on the side and, recording this or actually getting some information? I think as far as I know, and I'm actually maybe allowed to say, if you are searching or asking questions through Google Assistant, that might be something that is being kept and also used. But like listening on the background and taking that information and utilizing it, that is highly unlikely. So that's as far as I can kind of say for now. But I understand the concern, Google, and you can see that privacy, because it's such a big issue, internally, privacy is taken as a huge, important point. I can also tell you one thing, just as like a Google employee. When I joined Google in the first year, I, was working, and there was a, employee in another team who was actually, there was a meeting set up and we were communicating. Suddenly, a week later, I noticed that the employee is not there anymore. So it just felt like, what happened? I was supposed to meet this employee. There was a meeting schedule, and suddenly the employee is gone. And I think that was near like 2010 or 2011. And what I kind of came to know was somehow that employee, was like, there are various like very methodical ways to kind of maybe for testing purposes gain access to some data. But if someone is gaining access to some data, there is an audit trail, and that employee was, violating rules. That's why he was just fired. So I think I was just giving an example where there is importance given to some, users' privacy. Not everyone, no employee can get access to private data, but there are various systems in which, the processes or systems can, take privacy preserving output of these, as well as take some aggregated data, but directly accessing private data even is not internally allowed. And also with GDPR, there are also a lot of things that Google has to do to remove data when users are actually, opting out, or users are actually removing their data, or going away from a platform. I hope that kind of, I know that it doesn't answer everything, but maybe hopefully just gives a hint about.
Okay, thank you.
Bursa, I think you actually were about to ask a question, right?
Yeah, if you have time. So
Please.
just one thing, I mean, security on the edge devices because of IoT and sensors all over the world. I mean, can you give us something more about what are the core challenges? Because in your slides, I guess you didn't put those information a bit more.
I see.
Thank you.
No, actually, I think that's a very important point that you mentioned. So when you're talking about IoT and other devices, part of the problem or things that we see here is there are sensors here, and which is kind of the extra input from usual devices. Some of the aspects of mobile security is also applicable to these devices, IoT devices. One of the interesting problems here is doing these at a very efficient level, because some of these IoT devices might be very, very power efficiency might be needed and things like that. So I think those are the specific cases. I'm not actually, aware of very specific problems that are, security problems that are actually for IoT devices.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Rajak bhai, do you have time for questioning or?
In fact, some other sessions have just been started. It's better if we can conclude. I believe our authors and the participant can keep communication with our speaker for further discussion.
Thank you.